MELD is an MPE-enabled synthesizer with a dual oscillator setup and a robust modulation matrix capable of crafting an enormous variety of sounds. Let's take a look. Here I have the default MELD patch, and I'll start by playing a simple melody on it. I'll go ahead and turn off oscillator B for now and focus on oscillator A. MELD features a wide variety of oscillator types, each with their own macro parameters that change depending on the oscillator that I pick. I can also adjust the octave, semitones, and fine-tuning of each oscillator here. In the middle, we have the standard ADSR amp envelope, which controls the volume of the sound over time. I can adjust each individual parameter down below or in the graphic, and also adjust the slope. I can switch the amp envelope mode to trigger, which ignores the sustain section, loop, which loops the entire envelope over and over again, or AD loop, which just loops the attack and decay. Let's take it back to the default none here, reset most of these, and just turn up the release. Over on the right, I have a filter, which I can turn on and off here, and adjust the filter cutoff. Each filter features 2 macros. And similar to the oscillators, the macros change depending on the kind of filter I pick. Let's take it back to the default for now. I'll turn up the tone and shape here to really hear this sound. Over on the right, I have a tone control, which attenuates the high or low frequencies. Panning on the top, and I can adjust the volume of each individual oscillator here. If I go too high, I always have a limiter to stop me. I'll turn the shape back down for now. I can switch from polyphonic to monophonic so that only one note is played at a time, and enable or disable legato mode, which chooses whether envelopes get re-triggered if one note overlaps into another. If I turn up spread, by default it randomizes the detuning and panning of each individual note. If I turn on stack, copies are created for each note with their own modulations, filter, and engine. I can also turn up the drive for some distortion. And finally, adjust the master volume down below. Let's turn the drive down for now. Say I wanted to modulate this tone control here. To do this, I'd like to use the modulation envelope. To map the modulation envelope to the tone control, I'll go over to the matrix. The matrix is where I can see all the different mappings in my synth. I'll find the modulation control envelope here, and the parameter I want down below. Let's click and drag up here. Nice. Let's go to the M envelope here, maybe turn up the attack a bit. Let's go ahead and turn oscillator B on and switch it to fold FM. I'll turn up the amount and shape so we can hear it. Notice how when I switched to oscillator B, the B tab automatically became selected with its own discrete set of envelopes. I can change these envelopes independently from oscillator A, or link them with this chain icon. That way, whatever change I make on one engine automatically gets copied over to the other. Let's go ahead and unlink these for now, and I'll turn oscillator A off. I'd like a more rhythmic effect for oscillator B, so to do this, I'll go over to the matrix, click on the filter frequency, and map LFO1 to it. Let's go to LFO1. Here I can adjust the rate of the LFO, the shape, and fold it up for more complexity. I can adjust the phase and disable re-triggering, which prevents the LFO from restarting every time I play a new note. Let's switch it to a synced value and turn re-trigger back on. In addition to doing some basic shapes, I can switch to ramp. Notice how the macros for these oscillators change depending on the oscillator type. You can do wander, alternate, Euclid, and pulsate. Let's switch it back to basic shapes for now and reset all these. Over on the right, I can play with some LFO1 effects to further dial in my shape. To take full advantage of this, I'll go back to the matrix, unmap the filter frequency from LFO1, and do LFO1 effects instead. Let's try attenuating this a bit. Maybe do a little fade in with the ramp. And if I change the initial LFO, which I can see in the background here, it will affect LFO1 effects. Let's try out some other ones, like sample and hold, or maybe attenuverter, comparator, and many more. The possibilities for modulating these LFOs are truly endless. If I wanted a more basic sound though, I can go ahead and unmap it from LFO1 effects and simply try LFO2, which you can see over here on the right. Here we have much more basic controls for simple modulation. Let's go ahead and hear that with oscillator A. Let's tweak some of these parameters to dial in the sound. Let's dive deeper into Meld by opening up the breakout view. Here I can see all the list of parameters and modulations from oscillator A and B. Let's play with the MIDI and MPE section. I'll start by going ahead and mapping the velocity over to my oscillator 1 macro. Now if I go back to my MIDI clip and adjust the velocities here by selecting all of them, you can really hear the difference. Let's randomize these for now. I can do the same thing with MPE controls. I'll switch over to Engine B and go ahead and map the pressure MPE control to the filter frequency and maybe also the panning. Now if I go over to the MPE tab and start messing with the pressure, you'll hear the difference. Let's turn some of these up. There we go. I can also copy all my mappings from Engine B over to A and vice versa. We can also just clear all the mappings immediately by hitting the X here. Let's take it back over to Engine B and play with the LFO1 effects again. I'll turn the scale on the effects all the way down and try out some different ones. Let's do sample and hold and comparator. Even though this LFO exists in Engine B, I can actually have it modulate anything in Engine A with the cross modulation tab. I'll go ahead and turn off oscillator B for now, and unmap oscillator A from the LFO1 effects for a more consistent sound. Next, I'll switch from basic shapes over to dual basic shapes. Notice if I click up here, dual basic shapes has musical accidental symbols next to it. This means that if I enable the Use Current Scale feature, macros in this oscillator will become scale aware. I can see on the top that my scale is set to C minor, and let's go ahead and turn up the shape so I can hear this better. Now you'll notice that the detune macro sticks to the scale I'm in. I'll turn this off to hear the difference. Sounds a lot more dissonant and atonal now. You'll also notice that when I turn Use Current Scale on, the semitone control in the oscillator section turns into scale degrees. Awesome, let's go ahead and turn on oscillator B. I'll turn oscillator A off for now just so we can focus on this. Not only do certain oscillators use the current scale, but certain filters do as well. Let's try membrane resonator here. I'll turn down the frequency and turn up the Q so it really rings out. Let's turn this down so we don't get quite so much distortion. I'll turn on the drive as well. That's beautiful. Notice that when I turn this off, this effect becomes much less musical. Using the current scale allows membrane resonator to stay in key. Let's hear that back with oscillator A. Now, let's say I didn't want the membrane resonator to stick to the scale, but I still wanted my dual basic shapes to be in key. To edit these settings, I'll go over to the Settings tab and turn the Filter Scale Awareness off for Engine B. I can also do the opposite, keep this on and turn the Oscillator Scale Awareness for Oscillator A off. I can even turn off key tracking completely so that this oscillator just plays the same note regardless. Let's turn oscillator B off for now and focus on oscillator A. Over on the right, we have the glide setting. By default, if I turn the glide up, it's on portamento mode, which means it's just going to do a pitch bend from one note to the next. If I switch to glissando and have Use Current Scale turned on, it will pitch up and down in discrete steps in the musical scale. Turning scale awareness off will cause the glissando to pitch up and down in semitones instead of scale degrees. Cool, let's turn oscillator B back on and hear it with the drums and bass. Awesome. You can see the endless sound design possibilities that Meld has to offer, and in an intuitive and easy-to-use interface.